Okay, so Netwrix, you recently published the Hybrid Security Trends report, and I believe that was comparing and contrasting on-prem security with cloud security, security in the cloud. Was there an obvious winner, if you like? One was more safe than the other, or is it a bit more complicated than that?
My usual answer would be which one is safer at all, or is the one which is disconnected? But well, our respondents recognize that a cloud-based infrastructure is overall sort of safer as compared to on-prem. Of course, there are still challenges to overcome, things where you have to look after. But over the years, security pros have sort of become less concerned about these challenges. So yeah, lack of budget, IT or security team being understaffed, lack of expertise in cybersecurity, specifically in the cloud area. These are still areas of concern. Overall, security as such depends on processes and frameworks in place. So there is work to be done. When you look at these areas for cloud and on-prem security, there are two main differences. Number one is the split in responsibilities between a cloud service provider like Google, Amazon, or Microsoft Azure, where each of them have their own ways of splitting the details of these responsibilities. And users should be well aware of that split. How much do I have to do by myself and how much is done for me, which is sort of a usual misconception saying that should be the job of my service provider, which is in the essence not, and then you have an issue. The second aspect is the different complexity. So for any sort of cloud instances, the way they interact internally and with the existing on-prem infrastructure, and in 95% of the cases, you would say that there's always a coexistence of on-prem and cloud. You have it in a way that it's not like configuring a range of servers and desktops as we know it. It is that orchestration layer that is the one that is responsible for dynamic loads, spinning up things, tearing down additional resources. That one can be tricky in itself because there is a lot of security challenges specifically in this orchestration layer. Yeah. So overall, cloud is seen safer, comes with its own challenges that need a little bit more sort of diligence in it.
Okay, and you've referenced certain of the challenges. Is it that the security challenges for on-prem versus cloud are completely separate, or are there some in common? And did the survey uncover the main concerns that people have in those different environments? And I say, was there any commonality, or they are very specific to each of those environments?
I think common over the for both for on-prem and cloud is that challenge of being understaffed, being sort of short on knowledge and resource to say, okay, I can solve the issue with the people I have. That's what 51% of our respondents are saying. Specifically saying that this is an element of challenge for on-prem, probably because it's closer to them, because only 27% say, well, this is the same case for the cloud environment. I would point that to that sort of split in responsibilities, as mentioned before. The interesting aspect is that the lack of expertise, as well as those sort of the inconsistent tooling for both worlds, is a slightly bigger concern for the cloud than for on-prem, which again is sort of, am I really sure that I know what I'm doing in the cloud in terms of orchestration and stuff like that? Where with the overall experience we bring in with on-prem equipment of setting up a server, of running desktops, of maintaining the infrastructure, we know exactly what we have to do, and lack of staff or being understaffed is therefore the felt challenge there, I guess.
And in terms of the consequences of data breaches for those different environments, again, are they equally painful, or are there, is one environment when something goes wrong, does it become far worse a problem than the other, or is it just, it doesn't really matter, a breach is a breach and consequences are similar wherever they occur?
Basically the latter part. A breach is a breach, as you said. It's yeah. In essence, we didn't really ask that question precisely in the way as you phrased it. So it's fair to say we do not have data that is sort of responding to that question, whether there is a separate way of looking at the consequences for on-prem or for cloud data breach. The most common consequence is unplanned expenses of any kind. Yeah, in any sort of 10%. So every 10th organization experience at least one severe effect of these attacks, such as a loss of competitive edge. Sorry, sometimes I'm still German. Customer churn or decrease in new sales. So the consequence overall is likely the same. A data breach is a data breach, whether it's originating in the cloud or on-prem. You're losing something.
And in terms of what the survey did or didn't uncover, and with what tools people are using, again, compare and contrasting the two environments, did you discover the types of solutions that most folks are using? And then there were some sort of outliers or just thoughts as to whether everyone's taking a similar approach, if you like, to security, or as I say, there was quite a wide variety of different approaches.
Well, this is actually kind of an interesting element in the report, because what we discovered is that they do treat these parts of their IT environment differently. On premises, the three most common security measures being used are backups, password management, and MFA, multi-factor authentication. For the cloud, MFA topped the list. So followed by backups and encryption, which is sort of in itself an interesting part, as I said, as the comparison of this year's results to our previous reports about security incidents shows that user or admin account compromise has more than doubled over the last years. In consequence, the use of MFA as a protective measure is the #1 solution in, as I said, in cloud security. And what does it mean for on-prem? Is that MFA part less of a concern? This is something where we probably have to dig deeper in it. Nevertheless, MFA password managements are common measures, as we just said, followed by user training, encryption, and PAM. It is kind of, it tickles me to say, what is behind that? And maybe we do this in next year's iteration of the report, because if you think of it, if you think of the exposure, especially on the on-prem part, and what you see as sort of attack trends in terms of compromised credentials, you would actually say that, okay, MFA needs to be sort of in higher in the ranks when we're talking about on-prem, not just password management, password vaults and stuff like that. So this sort of just-in-time privilege, multi-factor authentication, I would say we should see this more also on the on-prem side. But it is what it is. That's the report, what has the report uncovered, and it opens a sort of an inroad to question more details, I guess.
Yeah, and I don't know whether the next question about what people have any plan, their plans to improve security, whether that sheds any light on that issue, whether they're all saying, the on-prem people are saying, oh, we're all going to invest in multi-factor authentication, so that answers the query you've had. I expect it's not that simple, but did you uncover people's plans to in security, and
Yeah.
what did that show?
Partly, which is again sort of that idea of let's dig deeper there in the next iteration, because 3 of the top 4 planned security measures are really closely related. That's identity governance, review of access rights, PAM, are all there to help ensure that the right users have the right access to the right things at the right times. You know that mantra. And automating these processes saves valuable IT time, IT team time, talking about being understaffed. And it basically improves the accuracy, that sort of, it helps to yield at a resilient towards an agile security posture in that complex of how do we organize our identities. Next on the list is data classification. Knowing who is doing what at what time, with what kind of infrastructure, with what kind of data is one hand. On the other hand, you need to know what is behind the data, what is there. And that's the data classification solution part, which is in itself there to tune your protection measure to the sensitivity of the data you have. In itself, the amount of data generated by orgs will grow even more. And we have seen it in the recent past that regulators' requirements of handling such data will become even more complex. The best example is companies and orgs and regulators talking about, shall we use chat GPT, AI, talking about Italy, talking about Samsung. Yeah, how do we handle our data? Who do we give it to? How do we use it? That's another element here. So to summarize, identity governance tops the list, supplemented by data governance. Interestingly, when we asked security pros to what they would prefer to enhance if they had a chance to decide on their own, privileged access management appeared on their top choice. So very specific PAM, not just so much about identity governance in itself, but very precise, very focused on a specific solution.
Okay, and I'm wondering if the survey asked or uncovered anything. I mean, cyber insurance. I mean, it's been around for a while. I'm never quite sure what it does or doesn't do. But I mean, were people in the survey interested in it? Were they, taking advantage of it? Just anything that you uncovered around cyber insurance would be interesting.
Yeah. Whenever cyber insurance is part of the discussion, I need to make sure that there is a proper understanding. So let me start with one crucial aspect. A cyber insurance is not a carte blanche or replacement for a good cybersecurity posture. Never will be, never was. It's a transfer of risk. The risk of financial loss. So if you neglect your obligations to secure your data, your identities, your infrastructure, no insurance will pay. Never. In the recent changes in the cyber insurance landscape has already documented that. So in order to get an insurance policy, what you have to do is you will have to answer the questions of those insurances about your security architectures, your measures, where MFA and patch management, MFA 63% and patch management 55%, are being seen as mandatory, as you must have this, probably by many insurance providers. As always, these measures don't guarantee a no breach life, but they make it harder for an attacker to infiltrate you. When claiming a loss, the providers will verify that these security measures are in place, in fact in place and not just on paper, and that they are well maintained. So 50% of our respondents had to improve their measures to either reduce the premium or to get coverage at all, which is an interesting piece. So yeah, we do have something, but it's not sufficient enough. 44% of the organizations are insured and 15% plan to purchase a policy, probably within the next 12 months. So cyber insurance plays a larger role. And I guess it also documents that generic shift we see in our industry, that this sort of assumption of never being breached is finally fading away, or saying, so as even with our best efforts, even with the tools in place, the structures in place, the processes in place, even if we maintain a good cybersecurity posture and a strict cybersecurity hygiene, we have a chance of being breached. And therefore, cyber insurance plays an important role in that part, I guess.
Okay, and more generally, whether it was in the or covered by the survey or just anecdotally, what you find, we tend to assume that security is still dominating as the #1 topic within the IT landscape. Is that I say either what the survey did uncover or didn't, or you just anecdotally are aware of? Is it the #1 priority, or are other things out there as well?
Yeah, data security, and specifically data security, has been topping the list of IT priorities for organizations since sort of back in 2019, when we launched the first survey. In this year's iteration, so for 2023, 69% of the respondents named data security as their main priority. So data and network security, as well as security awareness, are the three top priorities, probably also in the broader OT landscape. But if you combine these with being understaffed as the biggest challenge, there is a need to improve the effectiveness, to automate processes within the security workflows. And that need remains an important priority for almost 40% of our respondents. So is this a task for the IT team? It is, and probably will remain. And you know, from the sort of organizational size, that sometimes it's a mixed bag of things, where the responsible for IT management, IT help desk, and cybersecurity is one team. Larger organizations might split into more specific teams depending on the size of the organizations. Nevertheless, it's always that mixture of, do we have enough staff to address the task at hand, where that is, as mentioned before, sort of the main response in terms of as a challenge.
And in terms, I mean, you mentioned some of the solutions, if you like, people are planning to invest in. And I mean, we know there are sort of topics, we mentioned multi-factor authentication, there's SASE, XDR, etc. But as well as these sort of point solutions, is it fair to say that there's a growing emphasis on cyber resilience as an objective, which includes a multitude of things, not all directly around cybersecurity, as you say? You know, a backup and recovery is quite important. Yeah. So is that a growing trend, and do you think largely that is helpful, or does it muddy the waters in any way?
Cyber resilience is a topic, a term that is sort of my core focus when I'm doing my own research task, my own sort of, where's my heart, put it that way. I've seen a lot of definitions and misleading interpretations of that term in recent years. Despite myself being in the cybersecurity industry, I have a slight concern that the term cyber resilience will be misused and misrepresented by tools and technologies in the place. So the best definition I have come across for cyber resilience is that one coined by the Stockholm University, which is the ability of an entity to continuously deliver the intended outcome despite adverse cyber events. So in that definition, there is no focus on tools. There's a focus on processes, on on the way we tie cybersecurity postured, cybersecurity measures and processes to business processes, as the business processes are the ones delivering that intended outcome, not us as IT guys. We can, or security guys, we can be an enabler, but we will never be the one primarily delivering the outcome. The other important part is that it takes a realistic stance on adverse cyber events, that it states that despite no ifs, no absolute security, no 100% security, as this is never going to happen. So if you plan your workflows, if you plan your fallback scenarios according to that assumption, which we've mentioned throughout our conversation today, that you will have that idea of, what do I do if this happens? What do I do if my main assets I'm using to run this business process, to deliver that, or to generate that outcome of that business process, if these are becoming unavailable due to a adverse cyber event? What are my options? What is my fallback scenario, so to speak? So Cyber Resilience Act here in the EU, or mentioned in various forms, is a concept that addresses that shift away from 100% security stance and realizes or embraces the idea of, you can't do business anymore without the support of digital information, of digital assets. But on the other hand, it also accepts the fact that something bad will happen to you. And that's the interesting part of cyber resilience. Whether you use MFA, XDR, PAM, data governance, identity governance in the context of cyber resilience is, again, up to you, up to your business processes. If I'm in the healthcare sector, which is heavily based on human interaction, talking to a nurse, talking to a practitioner, talking to specialists, there might be a different way of living cyber resilience than in a manufacturing environment. Kind of.
And, in terms of, obviously you've carried out the report for a number of years, it'd just be interesting to know what Netwrix's role is in all this. You know, why do you do the report, but also what is it in all we've talked about? Where do you fit in? What is it that you do and don't do in terms of the cyber security, cyber resilience landscape?
Yeah, so we at Netwrix, we look at a given digital infrastructure and we see the primary attack vectors: data, identities, and infrastructure. Addressing these, Netwrix empowers information security and governance professionals to identify and protect sensitive data to reduce the risk of a breach. We identify and protect identities to reduce the in quite simple terms, to reduce standing privileges on the one hand side, standing administrative privileges, standing admin rights is an issue, is one of the larger issues in the identity space. We also help IT teams to improve the security of their IT assets in terms of, or in ways that the attacks that are detected have a lesser impact because the infrastructure is hardened, or that they can be responded to faster with a lesser effort. So these attack vectors, data, identities, infrastructure, these are the things we see as sort of the corresponding elements to cyber resilience, because that's what a business process is sort of made of when we look at digital assets. You have the data that is generated in that business process, you have the identities using with that stuff, and you have the infrastructure that is used for manipulating, generating data. Overall, we have about 13,000 organizations worldwide that identify and protect sensitive data with our tools. And that's the part where we are there. We reduce the chance of a breach, we detect, we respond to, and recover from security threats. So in that sense, we help to enable a resilient business process, and we want to reduce the impact. By that, we want to reduce the impact of a adverse cyber event.
I'm just curious as to, I mean, is there a typical customer? I mean, when someone first comes to you, is it because they've had a ransomware attack, they've lost a load of data because they didn't back it up properly, they're applying for cyber insurance, as you outlined earlier, and they're not sufficiently up to spec to be to be given that? Or is it all of those? I mean, or is there a typical, is it often, regrettably, it is it? Just be interesting.
We have customers in which would be classified as SMBs. We have customers in the enterprise level with hundreds of thousands of devices that are sort of protected with our technology, i.e. That we are checking these devices for unwanted change, for example. So the reasons for customers to come to us are multifold, in that sense of revamping their information security approach, talking about data governance, identity governance, that we say, okay, we need to re-architecture our security, and looking at it from a different perspective, not so much tool focused, but very much on process focused. One element of it, and the far other end, is to say, okay, we've experienced a breach on our domain controller, on our Active Directory, and we want to have a tool in place that helps us to never make that experience again. So it's either out of pain or out of preparation. Simplified.
And one tends to assume that larger enterprises are the main focus for the bad actors. That's where they're putting most of their attention. Did the survey confirm that it is the large company and the SMBs are slightly under the radar? But if that is the case, do you worry, or again, did the survey uncover that the SMB were maybe a bit complacent, think, well, I've only 10 and 15 employees, no one's interested in me, so I don't need to be too concerned about security? Just thoughts as to the varying sizes of organizations and how vulnerable they may or may not be.
Oh dear.
Sorry, if
I love to have that conversation with some of these guys, answering the question like, "Oh, we're not important enough." No, you are. So from an attacker's point of view, they might not attack you because they want to sort of harm you as a specific organization or as an individual. In some cases, when we're talking about broad phishing campaigns, you're just the other fish in the net. And in terms of targeted attacks, you are just a step on the ladder. If you're, and we all are part of some sort of supply chain. In the manufacturing world, in the healthcare world, in the banking and finance world, we all do something that is sort of helpful for our customer's next step. And if the customer is a larger organization specifically, then even an SMB is an interesting target, as from an attacker's point of view, you might provide another way of getting to the bigger fish, of getting to the next bigger target. Therefore, SMBs have a tendency, unfortunately, to say, we are lesser concerned about the cybersecurity aspects in our lives, as on the other hand side, these large breaches, Continental AG here in Germany, Colonial Pipeline, they are getting into the news. On the same side, if you follow the ransomware tracks, you find always these small organizations being attacked. And it's always that notion of, hey, you are part of a a larger sort of chain of value generation. You do something for yourself to support either in service or in product another customer. And that in itself is the element where you say, where I say, that makes you a target. Yeah, because your supply to something else can be misused by an attacker, whether it's software or services or some manufactured product.
And maybe just finally, as we finish, it'd be good to know, in terms of the overall cybersecurity landscape, are you an optimist or a pessimist? I mean, do you think, as I think everyone accepts now, events events will happen. You can't prevent all attacks, but are you confident that the industry is more or less keeping up to speed, and therefore there's not going to be no complete catastrophes? Or do you worry that at some stage the digital world will have to stop and reevaluate sort of everything that's been understood so far, because there'll be something so horrendous, if you like, that everyone will go, well, hang about putting all this information online, etc., is maybe not such a, just your thoughts, where you are on that, really optimistic or slightly pessimistic, if you like.
Let me answer that in sort of two parts. Our respondents are mostly optimistic. 67% of them say our organizations are more secure now than they were 1 year ago. IT professionals feel more secure due to a human factor. They say that both IT teams and regular users are now better trained. Second part, personally, I would say I'm a security optimist with a realistic taste. By the way, it's an interesting thing, because the question, this is beyond cybersecurity. That's exactly a book that is addressing the sort of the pessimistic, the rather realistic, or the optimistic way of handling things, of what good cybersecurity can have as an impact on the global economy, by the way. So if you look at the history of our industry, there were quite a few moving, or better say exponentially growing parts. IT dependency, number of malware variants, the professionalization of cybercrime are just a few to name here. And what we do is we are pushing the boundaries. We're simply saying we find ways to limit the impact and reduce the likelihood of an attack. In the same way, we are implementing structures and workflows to operate under stress, now, while suffering a adverse cyber event. Does that mean that we will eradicate cybercrime? Probably not. As with any other form of crime, come on. The legislators across the globe are picking up on it. There are many recent examples in the for international cooperation among leaders, among law enforcement agencies. So these are just a few reasons to be a realistic cybersecurity optimist, I would say.
Okay, it's been tremendous to chat to you. You've shared some great insights and information, Dirk, so I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you.